Suicide is America's 10th leading cause of death. A recent study says black boys between the ages of 5 and 12 are more likely to die by suicide than any other age group. Suicides among black children under 18 have gone up 71% in the past decade. Here's a list of states where adults report the highest cases of anxiety or depression. You have, of course, Oklahoma, which leads with 39% of adults reporting. You also have Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, Arizona, Kentucky, West Virginia, New Mexico, Tennessee, as well as Nevada. Joining us now is Crystal Curry, licensed critical mental health counselor and founder of Compass Life Skills and Counseling. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
For the longest, it was this thing, black kids were not killing themselves at the same rate as white kids. What happened?
Yeah, so finally we had some research come out that actually found that black kids are killing themselves at a 5 times higher rate than their counterparts. And what it also found is that black kids don't just kill themselves, they do it impulsively without a plan, which is completely separate from their white counterparts or their Asian counterparts.
And so does that mean that something happened, something triggered that, as opposed to, if you're looking at white kids, depression, prolonged periods, and then it was planned out? And so, is that about trauma? What is that?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with trauma. And in the black community, unfortunately, we have normalized a lot of traumatic experiences. So one thing that we have normalized is that as black parents, we force our children to be it means you obey me without question. And if you don't obey me, then I will whoop you into submission. And so we have to, it makes us tell our children, I'm going to tell you what to think. I'm going to tell you what to feel. And our children have no outlet, because what research also shows is that black children talk to their family exclusively about their suicidal ideations or their suicidal thoughts. And when they can no longer talk up to their family about what they're feeling because it's not appropriate, then they internalize it and they're unable to cope, and they actually become their feelings, such as sadness or grief, instead of actually learning how to cope with it, feel it, and let it go.
Are there any parts of the country, when we talk about where African Americans live, really it's like a reverse L in the country. Are there any parts of the country where they are much higher than other areas?
Yeah, so research shows that it happens mostly in intercities where there is more exposure to trauma, because black kids have a higher rate of exposure to trauma, but also their exposure to trauma is more severe. So trauma deals with, racial injustices. It also deals with poverty. It also deals with discrimination and violence in the community and in the home.
Questions for the panel. Kelly.
First and foremost, thank you for just bringing this to light. In full transparency, I was one of those youth who did have suicidal ideations, dealing with depression and anxiety. And, thankfully I'm here today through a team of people, parents and teachers and pastors and the like. But my question to you is, given my own experience, can you explain or just give me your thoughts on how to reconcile the notion of religion with rationale? Because a lot of my conflict was the fact that you cannot just pray pain away. There are people who God made to be therapists, and sometimes the pastor doesn't have all the tools. So can you just, explain that and just elaborate on that further for the audience?
Yeah, so religion sometimes overshadows the work that needs to be put in order for you to heal from your traumatic experiences, right? Because it just says, let's just pray it away, let's just fast it away, and then everything will be good. But it actually takes work, because trauma isn't just what happens to us, but it also deals with what happens inside of us. So anytime there is a traumatic experience, you change mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. And so a therapist and and your support system helps you realize and understand the traumatic changes that have happened and the emotional blind spots that have come as a result of what happened to you. So it does take more effort than just praying. It actually takes the work. And, the Bible said faith without works is dead, but the work comes
Exactly.
in from doing it on the outside, and you have to do the work on the inside.
Amisha.
Absolutely. And I feel you, and this day means a lot to me. My own little brother was 12 years old when he committed suicide. So coming from someone who's very close to an individual who went through this process, and my family, for the most part, still does not fully acknowledge the fact of what he died from, because from that Christian perspective, they don't believe in suicide and don't want to talk about it. But it was literally 4 months after our mom had passed away from cancer. My question to you is specifically around Black boys, because we're noticing and seeing the numbers and the rise in suicide among young Black males specifically. And those numbers are shooting up. Part of me believes that it is part and parcel of a culture that teaches Black men and Black boys that they cannot show emotion, that they have to be strong through everything, that they're supposed to just be able to pick up and keep going no matter what happens around them. And I think that in my little brother's case, watching my mom pass away, knowing that, my mom was a single parent and she was basically the leader of our household, the rest of us were older. He was the youngest in the family. And at the end of the day, his coping was not there. And he did not show the signs that we hear about often in terms of withdrawal, in terms of not talking to people. All of those things were things that we wouldn't have been able to see because they were things that were not shown. And to your point earlier, the process was different. People asked us about a note. He did not leave a note. It was a very impulsive act. He jumped into the Chicago River and he was gone. And I feel like, there's so much that goes on, particularly for our young kids, particularly Black males. And it's not talked about often. It's kind of pushed under the rug and they really suffer. What are some things or some ways that we could, work as a community to be able to basically wrap our arms around them and show them better ways of coping with the things, honestly, in many cases that are outside of their control?
Right. So it involves building a safe space for them where they can go and they recognize that I can go here and I can talk and I can be whatever I need to be and I can feel whatever I need to feel without feeling guilty or without feeling shameful. And they need to be able to actively work through the feelings of anger, of being overwhelmed, of being frustrated, because what we're finding is they're suppressing all of this. And when it comes to, for example, like your brother, death is such a big concept. And even as an adult, we have difficulty processing death. And so as children, if we don't help them process these really big emotions and stop as though we do in the Black community with forcing them to suppress and act tough and be tough and wear these emotional masks, they never learn how to cope. And so they honestly start to emotionally detach from situations. And that's why you have so many Black people walking around saying it is what it is, because they emotionally no longer know how to cope or process with what's happening to them.
Michael.
Thanks for coming on today, Crystal. This is very, very important topic. You mentioned that African American youth will commit suicide but not have a plan. I think it's the way you phrased it, not have a plan compared to like white youth, et cetera. What are some of the common signs that youth will exhibit when they're contemplating suicide so that we can possibly prevent things from happening? And are those signs in African American youth the same or different when it comes to white youth, Hispanic youth?
Yeah, so they're pretty much the same, but because these children are Black, they get labeled as oppositional defiant disorder, or they get labeled as ADHD, when in fact, because they are unable to emotionally regulate, it comes out in their behavior. And so what happens is these children tend to get expelled from school more frequently. They tend to be referred to juvenile detention centers or juvenile justice, when in fact, they're just trying to communicate that emotionally they don't know how to cope. But instead of giving them mental health resources and emotional support, we consequence them for their feelings and their behaviors, which then reinforces the fact that they shouldn't talk to anybody about how they feel.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Doc, what could people get if somebody's out there who's watching, or they may have a child who they're seeing these things, seeing sort of these signs or traits, where can they get more information?
Yeah, so NAMI is a great resource, NAMI.com. You can go there. You can also text TALK to 741-741, and that's also a crisis line to help.
All right, Dr. Crystal Curry, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.